Hangout with Orangutans with BOS Foundation and global partners, I would like to say hi to our attendees in Zoom, and also say hi to everyone who's been watching the Hangout with Orangutans since the very beginning at YouTube. Thank you so much for attending and supporting the Orangutans. I hope you enjoy the show so far, and I hope we inspire you to pay attention more to the orangutan conservation and its habitat. So for tonight's webinar, we will be joined by specialists from the BOS Foundation's program. We will be joined by one of our veterinarian, Mas Agus Irwanto. He is the project manager at Samboja Lestari, and he also worked at the Narumenteng Rehabilitation Center in Central Kalimantan. We will have Pak Aldrianto as well. He is an orangutan habitat specialist, and he is currently the Director of Conservation at PT Restorasi Habitat Orang-Utan Indonesia. And last but not least, we have the prettiest amongst all panelists. We will be joined by Andrea Knox. She is actually a primatologist, but she also works with the BOS Foundation as advisor on international communication and research. Now, before we start, I would like to thank you to everyone who already submitted their questions during your registration to this webinar. We will try our best to go through all of the questions you already submitted. And for the attendees who already joined in this webinar, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box below, and we will try our best to go through all of your questions as well. So I think we should start with a warm-up question to get to know more about our panelists a little bit. And this is actually one of the questions that someone asked during the registration. How did you fall into the career path you are taking now, and what attracts you to it? I think we can start with Andrea. Hello, Andrea. Good evening, and could you please tell us about how did you fall into today?
Hi, Nia. Thank you for introducing me and hosting this session this evening. That's a big question. I've been interested in actual animal behavior and conservation centers when I was really little in Southern California. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry. My internet seems to have disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly actually now.
Am I? Sorry about that. As you know, the internet here in Indonesia doesn't always cooperate with us. But what I was saying before, I've been interested in animals since I was a kid. When I was an undergrad, I took a biological anthropology course, fell in love with primates specifically, worked in the US in ex situ conservation, went back to school for a master's where I specialized in orangutan communication and behavior. And that gave me a very specialized skill set where I was in a good position to move to Indonesia and actually join BOS originally as a volunteer in 2000, where we released rehabilitated orangutans, and our PRM team functions there to follow them, provide support if needed, and take behavioral data. And now I'm still with BOS a couple years later in a new role, but still enjoying the work.
Wow, amazing. And the BOS Foundation, obviously very excited to have you as part of our team. Okay, so let's head over to Pak Aldrin as our habitat conservation specialist. Could you please tell a little bit about yourself and how did you fall into this?
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a good opportunity to me to join this important webinar. Actually, my background is from forestry department, and I'm quite close working with BOS Foundation since 1992. So it's quite long ago. I know what this BOS is doing, and since then I'm working especially in forest rehabilitation. And then at that moment, BOS having a program about land rehabilitation in Samboja Lestari. So my first job with BOS Foundation with Orang-Utan work is from the forest rehabilitation, then into this is in a brief.
Wow, so amazing and so excited. We can start asking our veterinarian about the orangutan rehabilitation in general while he is already introducing himself. So, Mas Agus, can you also explain a little bit about the main activities that the BOS Foundation do in terms of orangutan rehabilitation?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me in here in this webinar meeting. So our main project is rehabilitation, of course, but rehabilitation is start with rescuing orangutan first, and then rehabilitating them, and also the main goal is releasing them. But another task is we also providing them with a long-term caring for orangutan who cannot be released in the wild.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds a lot of work actually, and I think like a lot of pies, a lot of finger, yeah, that you have to focus on a lot of subjects. So you mentioned about rescue, and also there's this question from our registrant that if you rescue an orangutan, usually what happens, how's the process, and how is it actually go or unfold during your rescue an orangutan?
Okay, so for rescuing orangutan, all orangutan have a what we call terrible traumatized because they separated from the mother in very young ages, and then some orangutan has terrible condition. So when we are rescuing orangutan, we will consider how old is him or she. And then after that, before we moving to the center, we should consider also they are still have a what we call well enough, because some our program is also like we call translocation. If we found orangutan that all enough and independent enough, it's not meant to be to entering our center. It's just straight to the other forest that's safe enough to them.
That's very interesting, actually. So, can all orangutan that you rescue be rehabilitated?
The one that came to our center or when we rescuing them is all enough and independent enough and also well enough, it will not entering our rehabilitation center. I mean, so we name it translocation process. So we just bring from the conflict area to the safe forest, something like that. So not all orangutan that we are rescuing will be rehabilitated.
I see.
Straightly, something like that.
I see. So there's also this other question that is really interesting. So despite orangutans already be into a rehabilitation center, can all of them be released back to the wild? And what will you do to orangutans that cannot be released?
That's actually good point, yeah, Mbak Nia. So not all orangutan that came to our center or already rehabilitated can be released, because some of them have disease from human. So they have like tuberculosis, hepatitis B, something like that, that cannot found in the wild population of orangutan. So this is the categories. This one cannot be released, and then the one that stay much longer with the human, so it will be more or less to have a chance to be released, and then the one that handicapped, something like didn't have arm, something like they are blind, something like that.
Wow, we definitely feel sad that there are some orangutans that cannot be released to the wild. But for those that do, I'm pretty sure that everyone wonders, like, what kind of environment that they can thrive, and what does the BOS Foundation do to ensure that the orangutans that released back to the wild can survive in the wild. And talking about this, I would like to go to Dr. Aldrianto, Mas Aldrin, hello. And I have a question for you in regard, what is the process of orangutan release and how long does it usually take?
Yeah, usually after having checked in Samudra Lestari Rehabilitation Center, this is checked by two things. One is about the healthy status, and the second one is about the behavior, their behavior. So they have to have a clean all of the disease, especially in the zoonotical disease or easily to spread up. And the second one about the behavior. So they are ready to be released into the forest, into the new environment. So we do expect that they can go survive easily or better in the forest. After having checked, of course, we have to also make a coordination with the forestry unit in the, or we call in Bahasa Indonesia is BKSDA, especially in East Kalimantan, we have East Kalimantan, but I do believe in each region have the forestry unit. So we make a coordination to the government, and then we transported the orangutan into the release point. So this is depends on the how long it's the distance between the rehabilitation center into the release area. Of course, we have to check the orangutan regularly, every 2 hours, for instance, to check whether the orangutan is okay and they are not, enough drink or food. Yeah, we quite sure make sure that the animal welfare is also in our consideration. And during the transportation, this is a lot of experience that we have. Sometimes we use the car, sometimes we through the river, even though we have to carry on by the human, this orangutan, or I mean that we in the cage in the cages, of course, into the release point. Then we release them. This is the duration can be 1 day until 2 days. It depends how difficult the situation and how far the access or the distance. So this is the brief process, but after the release, the work is not finished. Of course, we have to monitor them to make sure that they are being monitored, they are well adapt with the new environment. This is a whole story of the releasing.
Wow, that is a lot of work actually to do to release an orangutan. Wow, that is crazy. And we are so lucky to have the BOS Foundation doing all of this. And thank you so much for all panelists to have really good experience in doing this. So I wonder, when you release an orangutan to the wild, what kind of forest that's usually ideal for them to survive in?
Wow, it's about the ideal is a range, but we have to consider about one. If we release the orangutan into this area, we make sure that the number of the white orangutan is below 0.1 individual per kilometer square. In why? Because we don't want to introduce the new orangutan into the population of another wild orangutan, so this will make them conflict. The second one, to make sure that the forest is suitable for this orangutan. It means about the area, how big this area, and also the food that edible from the orangutan we have to consider. This is related with carrying capacity, whether the how much or how many orangutan can be released into this area, because we don't want to release the orangutan in the area which is quite small. We do expect the area that we use for the releasing orangutan is can be as big as possible in order that the orangutan can make a viable population, in order they can growing better for the next future. Because otherwise, if we not put this orangutan in lower, and this disease will decrease, and we don't want to expect that one. The second one is about we need to make sure that security is exists. It means that there is no illegal activity, for instance. We also to make sure all of the patrol is properly adapted in this area. So this is some requirement that we have the forest. Of course, we do expect that the legal standing of this land is quite clear. Who own this forest or land? Otherwise, this is will create another problem in the future. This is some and about the orangutan, just adding information, they even though they can survive until 1,500 meter above sea level, but the preference of living is below 500 meter above sea level. So if we provide them this kind of environmental, we do expect this is sweet for the orangutan. Is it?
Wow, that is a lot of work to ensure that the orangutans have a home after they are released back to the wild. And I can only imagine the work that the BOS Foundation has to do in terms of maintaining and conserving the habitat of the orangutans. So what are the benefits that the orangutan habitat conservation brings, not only to the orangutans, but to the people that probably lives in the area of orangutan where you release an orangutan?
Yeah, it's better if we're dealing with someone or with some people, not dealing when they are hunger. So this is will create a problem. So to make people that they are quite satisfied enough, but sometimes they just see a forest as a standing of the tree. They don't account it the intrinsic value of the forest. For instance, providing the water, providing the good oxygen, etc. But the local people, they can utilize the forest, even though this is for orangutan release area. They can utilize non-timber forest product, like for instance, the rattan, for instance, the honey, for instance, other resources from the forest, medicine, for instance. They can utilize this for their benefit. For the local people, they also can use as a job opportunity, for instance, even though in case of Roy, it's not that so easy, because now people thinking over and over to staying in the forest for such a certain period. So this is we have to consider when we with the local people. And of course, we also trying to make a community development program in the local community in order to increase their income or increase their knowledge or increase their education as well as the health status.
Wow, it is a lot of work to ensure the stability of the orangutans population, to make sure that they survive, to make sure that they have a home. It's a lot of work, and we hope that this inspires all of us to be more conscious about our daily life and to support the orangutan habitat and its orangutan conservation. And thank you so much for Aldrin for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I would like to go over to our prettiest panelist now, Ms. Andrea. As Aldrin mentioned before, after you release an orangutan, the work is not done. There are people who will go and stay in the forest and follow the orangutans to ensure that they adapt well in the new surrounding area. So Andrea has an experience as part in the post-release monitoring. And could you please explain a little bit what you do in the post-release monitoring activity?
Of course. Thank you for the kind introduction, Nia. Oh, can you guys hear me? My screen just froze.
Yes, we can hear you.
Our post-release monitoring activities are so important. So many people like to focus on forest for the rehabilitation process, the story doesn't end when orangutans are story. Our post-release monitoring teams are stationed at every single one of our release sites currently, for the foreseeable future. And I always break it down into they have two purposes. One is to support orangutans if necessary. This doesn't mean feeding them after release, but it means giving them a second chance if something goes really wrong. We've invested so much into these orangutans and they put so much effort into the rehabilitation process. If one were to fall ill or wander to a human area, we don't want that to be the end of their story. We can provide medical assistance or translocate them most of the time, because we rarely have to intervene with the orangutans, which is a good thing. Most of the time, we're actually taking behavioral data. So we're following these orangutans, understand success of these releases, and understanding what we do well in the rehabilitation process and what we can do better. We always want to get better. There's no goalpost. You don't finish. You always improve. So by analyzing ourselves and how the orangutans do post-release, we can continue to give future orangutans an even better chance to survive once they're released.
Wow, that is awesome. Really, really awesome. So usually, how long does the team have to stay in the forest and follow an orangutan to collect those data?
Well, we have orangutans a different priority. So when they're first released, we're following them nest to nest every day, and then we reduce in intensity to a couple of times a month. Ideally, if you can see an orangutan every month and get 3 days of data, circumstances permitting, that's wonderful. For as long as appropriate. As I said, our team's there for the foreseeable future. You haven't guessed, I am not originally from Borneo, but I am an exception. Our post-release monitoring teams are almost made up entirely of local men from these villages that are near our release sites. So not only do we bring a job opportunity that wouldn't otherwise be there, but we get to engage with these people in the area, the people who these releases are impacting, and help grow their understanding of orangutans. And they live out there. So there's no villages at our release sites. They're still a couple hours away, but these technicians grew up in the area. They grew up going into these forests. They know it like the back of their hand. So there's no timestamp. They don't just stay up for a week and leave.
Wow, so they actually can stay for quite a long time in the forest. That's really cool, actually. But do you remember during your
100%.
time in Batika, what's your biggest challenge? What's your biggest challenge when you were doing post-release monitoring activities with it?
So when people think of living in the forest, I always think the first thing that probably comes to mind that they don't like would be leeches, or only eating rice for a week, or long sweaty days. But for me, none of those things are what I consider the biggest challenge. As a researcher, you want to control as much as possible, especially in extreme conditions like that. You want to make plans and have plans for those plans and contingencies, be prepared for anything. But I am telling you, you are never fully in control. You're always at the mercy of the forest. It's a wild location. You put in as much effort as you can into planning, but anything could happen. I've had amazing moments where I've found a brand new mother still in that birthing nest with a baby orangutan at most days old, and then a storm rolls in that turns the skies black and the trees sideways, and you have no choice to leave. Or I've been quite literally in the middle of translocating an orangutan, as in have an orangutan in a cage that we're carrying to a new location, and we got attacked by a swarm of bees, like the sort of bees you see in cartoons, zipping around you, stinging you dozens and dozens of times. And there's nothing you could do to prepare for that or prevent that. And there's so many stories like this that you just always remember when you are not in a laboratory, you're not in a city, you are in the forest, you're in the home of these animals and creatures, you're the guest there, and you need to be aware and I guess respect that and be prepared for anything. Roll with the punches.
Wow, it truly is a one in a lifetime opportunity to have that kind of experience, and I'm pretty sure everyone's jealous about this, but that is a really inspiring story as well, Andrea. Thank you so much for sharing. I do have a last question for you. You mentioned about orangutan nest. So I imagine that they stay up high in the tree, right? But how do you spot an orangutan nest from the ground?
So it takes a bit of practice. A lot of people, I guess, this is anyone, the first time you look at a forest, you just see a lot of trees, a lot of greens, reds, and browns, and it all kind of looks the same. But you'd be surprised by how quickly, when you're there all the time looking at it, how you notice differences, and you could tell the smallest changes in the environment. And so orangutan nests, orangutans make them by bending and snapping branches into one another and kind of interweaving these branches, and it's hard to describe the sort of lattice work above you. And sometimes, until you kind of have that trained eye, it can blend right into the forest. But eventually you learn how to recognize these, how they're just slightly off the rest of the environment. And also, when they're snapping in these branches, they're typically also cutting off, water and nutrients to those areas, and the branches die. So over time, not the first day, but over the first couple of days, they'll start to change colors. The leaves go from green to red to brown. So you can even tell the age of the nest by the coloring, which is important too. And that also helps it stick out a little bit more. So these are just a couple things, but it's hard to put into words. It kind of just takes practice.
Wow, that's very interesting. And I'm pretty sure that all three panelists still and would love to talk more about your job, their life with orangutans, orangutan conservation and its habitat. But we do have a time limit, and we would like to answer some of your questions that you already submitted. We have a lot of questions. Thank you so much again for everyone who is submitting their questions. So I will read one of the questions here, and I think this is best answered by Pak Aldrin. We have a question here from Kevin from Indonesia, and the question is, what can ordinary people do to help preserve forest ecosystem?
Okay, actually you can do or help any in the nature wherever you are. I mean that there are gadget, for instance, make use of the gadget to spread off all of the energy that to serve to conserve the forest and also the orangutan. And there is a lot of, because the orangutan is only the big apes in Asia, only in Indonesia is in 90%. We have to proud of this kind of creature. So if not we are proud of this orangutan, who else? So this is a good opportunity that the young generation is interested in this conservation area, and this is also can spread up the using the social media spread up, or you can also helping some organization that related, or you just have a good living or environmentally friendly living. This is also the helping the orangutan, because it is indirect is helping, not what is ruining the forest where the orangutan is live. So this is you can do, even though you are a photographer, even though you are any job or any talent that you have, you can use it. This is
wow. That is very well said. Thank you so much, Aldrin. It does inspire us to do more to help the BOS Foundation and to help orangutan conservation and its habitat. So next, we have a question that I think is best suited to be answered by Mas Agus. We have a question from Faye from Indonesia. And I think this can also be answered together with this question: how to recruit the staff to take care of the orangutans, such as the surrogate mothers, technicians who work directly with the orangutans. Can anyone work as orangutan surrogate mother or technician?
Thank you, Faye, for the question. So, honestly, the opportunity is what we call, is quite open to all the people that want to be helping the orangutan conservation. But for technician or the babysitter, we prefer to choose the one that what we call in our community, because it will bring what we call a good impact to them. So they know that they realize that the orangutan is part of their life. The orangutan is what we call have a beneficial for their life. So they don't cut the tree, for example, because they protect the orangutan, for example, But the opportunity, is open for all the people out there, but we prefer using the local people in here. It's like what we call it's giving them like chance to have like a better livelihood, something like Pak Aldin talked before, because when we talk about conservation to the hunger people, it doesn't work, Mbak Nia. So it's something like that.
I see. Thank you so much for your answer, August.
You're very welcome, Nia.
We do still have a question for you, though. So
Really?
Yeah. So we have a question from Monique in Australia. How does COVID-19 affect orangutans and staff today and moving forward in the future?
For me, Okay, thank you. So, COVID-19, as far as we know, because orangutan and human share a lot of similarity about the DNA, and also COVID-19 has like what we call when we get sick or we get the sickness of COVID-19, they have the same receptor with us. The orangutan have the same receptor to the virus, to the coronavirus, so it will be have highly chances to get also the coronavirus. And for the impact, because as a veterinarian also we have a lot what we call some sort of like knowing in here, because we don't know yet that orangutan also can get the COVID-19, but we do also have protocol to protect our staff to transmit it if our staff or also the COVID-19 cannot transmit it to people, from the people to the orangutan. And the impact, yes, is quite terrible. Some what we call some, even though the prices for APD, we call like face mask, something like medical stuff, medication is quite high. No, it's pretty high, expensive during the COVID-19.
Wow, it's glad to hear that the BOS Foundation is doing everything they can to ensure the health, not only the staff, but also the orangutan. Thank you so much for your answer, Mas Agus.
Thank you, very welcome.
Thank you. And I think I would like to give this next question to Andrea. This is a question from Benjamin in Singapore. What's the least known fact about an orangutan?
That's a hard one. I feel like there's a lot. I feel like they're very misunderstood animals. Because of all the apes, they're the hardest to study. They live in very dense rainforests. They're hard to get to. They're the only ape that has a semi-solitary lifestyle, so they don't live in groups. There's so much we don't understand about orangutans. My personal favorite that I think is a cool little tidbit that I didn't know until I started working with orangutans is, bear with me here, is that you can tell by looking most of the time when an orangutan is pregnant. It's not just because they have a big belly. They actually always have what looks like a larger belly than humans because their intestinal tract is different and elongated to help them digest different foods in the forest and different vegetation. And it can become a little bit enlarged as well, but it's hard to tell the difference. But they actually have swelling further down that varies by individual, but it's really cool when you're out, especially in the forest, working with wild orangutans. And the ultimate goal here is propagation of the population, right? We want to see these orangutans we release have children and establish a new population. And then while these orangutans are rehabilitated, their children will be wild, and this forest will have a self-sustaining population. When you go into the forest and you see an orangutan with signs of potential pregnancy, it's an overwhelming feeling of excitement and joy and also success, because that's really what we're looking for. Yes, that's my fun fact. They can physically see when an orangutan is pregnant, and I feel like a lot of people don't know that.
I see. I think that's quite interesting, actually. And I think we have a question here in the question and answer box. How to catch poachers? Is there an invisible camera in the forest? And are there any signs of poachers? And I think this is best answered by Pak Aldrin. Could you please take this question away, Pak Aldrin?
Okay. Yes. Even though you have a camera, this is just prevent in the once or two times. But better you do a preventive one before diseases happen. So the preventive approaches is more more useful, that the people are aware why exposure is not allowed in the forest area where the orangutan is there. If we also have to distinguish what is the purpose of the purchase, because we have to distinguish if the local people is to consume from themselves, for instance, from the family. So we have to consider what kind of activity to prevent it. If, for instance, we're trying to develop some farming in their villages, for instance, to prevent that they are utilize the forest unsustainably. Because the poachers, if for instance, the poacher is doing illegally, because usually this is depend on the market. So we are also aware about the market need, and if it's not possible, we asking by law this is to be happen. So the people have to know if you are make illegal activity, and there is consequences of this illegal activity. Otherwise, people not learning. If you doing illegally and you just keeping on going, so this will happen and again and again. This might be the answer.
Wow, actually, that's very well said. That prevention is basically the best thing for preventing further damage, not only to the orangutan population, but also for the orangutan's habitat. Okay, we do still have several questions, and I'm pretty sure everyone's also wondering, and I'm actually quite surprised that some people don't know the answer about this question. And I think this is best answered by Mas Agus. So could you please explain to us, what do orangutan usually eat?
Okay, thank you, Nia. So orangutan, we call it frugivore. It means almost 90% they eat fruit. And then the rest is they eat young leaf, shoots, and also insect. Something like that, yeah. But for in the BOS Foundation also have consideration because the research that they call proof before or 90% they eat fruit is based on well population. So in BOS Foundation, as far as you know, that all the fruit that we can provide it is from, we call it cultivated fruit that hide a lot of sugar content. And in the wild, they eat fruit, but mostly with high fiber. So in BOS Foundation, we have a protocol for nutrition also. So so the menu, the diet for daily diet of orangutan is consists 50% of fruit, cultivated fruit, and 50% of veggies. So it's make a balancing routine for them.
Wow, so very strict diet, quite interesting actually. Thank you so much for that answer, Mas Agus.
Thank you.
And I think we could go to the next question. We also have a question from Shafa in Indonesia, and I think this question is best answered by Andrea. She asked, what can young people do to save orangutan in this pandemic situation?
Thanks for the good question. That's another long answer. It's frustrating. There's, I think, a lot of the same things we always say beforehand still apply. And I always like to promote lifestyle changes because not everyone can dedicate their lives to orangutans. Not everyone can donate. If you can, that's great. But if you can't, you can still make a difference in what you do on the day-to-day. A lot of things that are generally eco-friendly are good for orangutans as well. You know, reducing waste, reducing energy usage, and then also what you purchase. I always say, I know it's a worn out phrase, but every dollar is a vote. Hot topic word you hear all the time with orangutans is palm oil. And there's nothing inherently wrong with oil. It's not some evil oil that comes out of the ground. It's how it's processed. So, you know, when you buy something like sustainable palm oil, your dollar is voting to say this is okay, and you're not putting your vote towards a product. It could be palm oil, it could be another product that causes deforestation. So you should always be aware of what you're purchasing and try to be a smart buyer. During COVID, I think sometimes this clashes because another thing is, it's been mentioned before, we believe orangutans are susceptible to COVID-19. There's no confirmed cases yet. We want to prepare for the worst. So anything you do to help stop the spread helps us, you know. So reducing unnecessary trips, if you can stay at home more, you know, disinfect, stay away from people, wear masks. But here I think these things actually kind of clash, and something I noticed to myself. I'm at home a lot more, and I figured out how to order things to the house, which I thought was really great. And then I realized I was getting these big piles of boxes of bubble wrap. I'm like, but now I'm creating waste. So finding that balance, I think, so during the situation, still being aware of your ecological footprint, but trying to reduce the spread of COVID, and it helps orangutans and people. It helps us all get through this quicker. So that's the short answer to a long, long explanation.
Wow, that's also well said, actually, Andrea. Thank you so much for that answer. And we still have several other questions. Mas Agus, this one is for you. We have a question from...
Yes, I'm here, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And we have a question from Veronica in Indonesia, and she asked, have there been any zoonotic cases between orangutans and humans?
Thank you, Veronica. For zoonotic, actually, disease from orangutan is very rare. the original disease or origin disease from orangutan that transmitted to human is very rare, but the one that very what we call hazardous or harmful to orangutan is our disease actually. So something like coughing, influenza, tuberculosis, it can transmit it to them.
Wow. So the disease that we have can be transmitted to the orang-utans. That is,
yes.
Wow.
Because of the what we call because they share 97% DNA from us, from human.
Oh, wow. Wow. So we share 97% of our DNA with orangutans. That's very interesting, actually. Thank you so much for your your answer, Mas Agus.
You're welcome, Nia.
We do have another question in the Q&A box, though. And I think it's also best answered by you.
Okay.
At what age did orangutans die? And when an orangutan dies, his corpse is made into a fossil, or is it buried like a human?
That's interesting question, yeah. But we found that in the zoo, because in the wild population, we never do research, or we didn't have research yet how long they can live in the jungle or in the forest. But in the zoo, we have some specimen or individual can live up until 60 years old. But for what we call to be a fossil, something like that, or what we call cremation. Do you say cremation? No, we never do that. But for some several cases in our center, to prevent like what we call transmitted disease or spreading disease to the other orangutan or human or our technician, we do some cremation to our what we call orangutan corpse, something like that.
Wow, that's amazing, actually. Thank you so much again, Mas Agus, for the question.
You're welcome.
It has been lovely talking to every single one of you. And I understand that there are so many other questions that probably people would like to submit. And we thank you again for the people who already submit their question. I hope the answers that our panelists give inspire all of us to pay more attention to the orangutan conservation and its habitat. So we're at the end of this webinar session. Again, thank you so much for everyone who's been tuning in since the very beginning, or if you've been tuning in the middle and now just joined us, thank you so much. And I think I would like to close